Welcome back everybody to yet another episode on the channel. Thank you all for tuning in today. Super happy to have you with us. Today, we're gonna be talking about how to fish a Texas rig, and we're gonna be talking about a Texas rig from the beginner level, and we're gonna be talking about what a Texas rig is, why it's so good, and we're gonna even be talking about my favorite rod and reel setup for fishing a Texas rig, and then we're also gonna go over like my 5 favorite plastics that I like to use for fishing a Texas rig. Before we jump into this video, guys, Super K Jigs just released another new jig, and it's actually the Lion's Mane Finesse Jig. This right here, guys. I got a bunch of different colors over there, but these are a couple of the colors they sent me, but I was just gonna go ahead and show you guys why these things look so juicy. So if you guys have never heard me talk about Super K Jigs, guys, Super K is a jig company, and they also make some terminal tackle as well that I work with, and the reason I work with them, guys, is all their jigs are hand tied. All the skirts are hand tied on there, so these jigs are super high quality, guys. You're never gonna have to worry about the skirts just being complete trash and ripping off, and you know, jigs can get expensive. Sometimes you're paying $4 to $5 for a jig, so you want something that's gonna hold up in the long run. So like I said, all these jigs are hand tied, and here we have the Lion's Mane Finesse Jig. And what I like about this jig, guys, is look at the color on this thing, guys. I'll let this camera focus on it here. Look at the color on that beauty right there, guys. So this is a 3/8 ounce the Lion's Mane Finesse Jig, and finesse jigs are great for especially early season or late fall when those bites are a little bit tougher and just those fish are taking a little more, they're a little more finicky. It's my favorite time to bust out one of these finesse jigs. So great looking jig, guys. It's got kind of a football style head, which is pretty common with finesse jigs, guys, because you're generally dragging the bottom really slow with these. And I have another one in here that I'll show you the color on real quick. Now, guys, they have all sorts of different colors of jigs. These aren't the only ones here, but I just thought that these two colors were sick as hell. And this one right here, guys, look at this sucker. Look at this jig right here, guys. This thing is, I don't know, it's got this gold color going. The footage doesn't do it justice, guys. This thing looks sick, and I can't wait to get this thing out there. I think it's gonna get some good bites. The thing just looked great. So those are the Lion's Mane Finesse Jigs, guys. If you guys are interested in picking up these jigs or any other jigs in general, I will link Super K down below in the description, and I also have a discount code that you guys can use at Super K. So if you order anything from them, use the code WW20 and it's gonna save you guys 20% off of your order. All right, guys, so now the Texas rig. Let's talk about what a Texas rig is and why it is so great of a lure to be using. So now, a Texas rig is this right here, essentially, guys. As you guys can see, I have a EWG hook on there with a bullet weight. So what a Texas rig is you slide, when you're gonna do this at first, you take your line and you slide the bullet weight on first. Then you tie on your hook here. Now, the great thing about this bait right here, guys, is I never peg the weight usually. If I'm flipping around cover and stuff like that, I will peg the weight down there, but for the most part, I don't peg the weight. So what that allows that to do is to kind of drag the bottom with the weight away from the bait. So kind of the bait gets to be away from the weight, which is nice. So that is the basic principle of a Texas rig. That's all it is, guys. It's just a bullet weight slid on there with a EWG hook on there or an offset worm hook. For the weight, guys, let's talk about the weight really quick before we go any further. I have a 1/2 ounce tungsten on here. Now, it really depends on what you're fishing for current and what you're fishing for wind that day and stuff like that. A 1/2 ounce is what I commonly use on the Mississippi River, guys, because of the fact that I'm fishing with usually a lot of current, and I kind of want that bait to get down there wherever I throw it. So, but if you're fishing an area that's really slack and calm, you could drop it down to 3/8, even a 1/4 ounce in some places like that. But a bullet weight is essential. Now, I use tungsten bullet weights. The reason being I use tungsten is you can get away with a smaller profile with the same weight. So what that means is if you guys were to use a lead bullet weight, a 1/2 ounce lead bullet weight, it's gonna be a lot bigger than this 1/2 ounce right here. This is a 1/2 ounce tungsten. It's more dense, so you can get away with a smaller profile for the weight. Also, tungsten is a little bit more sensitive. If you can't afford tungsten, guys, because it is pricier up there, I understand that. You don't want to spend money on tungsten. Go ahead and get some lead. When I first started fishing a Texas rig, all I used was lead bullet weights. It's not gonna hurt anything too bad. I just use tungsten because that's what I just prefer to use. So a bullet weight is essential to this whole thing. Let's talk about the hook, guys. Now, you can use an offset worm hook if you want, but this is the hook that I prefer to use, and that is going to be a 4/0 offset EWG hook. Now I like to use a 4/0 hook. I don't like to use 3/0 or 5/0. Usually if I'm fishing like a bigger long worm, I'm gonna use a 5/0 hook because I want that hook to cover the majority of the bait. But for the most of fishing that I do and the baits that I use on here, guys, I like to use a 4/0 offset EWG hook. Usually I like to use a thicker wired hook just because I don't know, I feel like with those smaller wired hooks, I end up bending the hook on fish a little bit. But with these suckers right here, guys, you're not gonna have to worry about that. These ones are pretty good. So I would look for, you know, a thicker lined hook on there. But that is all the Texas rig is usually I use a 1/2 ounce tungsten with the 4/0 offset EWG hook. Now let's talk about my favorite setup for throwing the Texas rig, guys. And that is going to be, my favorite setup personally is going to be a 7.3 medium heavy fast action rod with a 7/1-to-1 reel on there. And then I usually use braid with like a fluorocarbon leader if I'm in clear water. But for this instance, I think I just spooled on like 15-pound or 20-pound fluorocarbon on here. That's just the setup I use. I fish a lot of stained water, so the fluorocarbon is not like a super big necessity, but that's just personally what I like to use. But I think what it comes down to, guys, is if you're gonna fish a 3/8 to 1/2 ounce, I would use a medium heavy fast action rod. If you go any lighter than that, down to like a 1/4 ounce, I'd suggest going to like a medium power rod. But my favorite setup for a Texas rig is a medium heavy fast action rod with a 7/1-to-1 on there. So that is my preferred setup for a Texas rig. Like I said, if you go lighter, get a little bit lighter setup, but this personally works great. It's super versatile. You can throw a lot of different weights on the Texas rig with this, and you can cover a lot of different things. So why do I think that the Texas rig is one of the best lures that you can use, or best baits? The Texas rig, plain and simple, guys, is really good, especially for beginners in my opinion, because with this offset hook here, you can rig your baits weedless. Now, when you're a beginner fisherman or even an experienced fisherman like myself, you do get, you get snagged up, and putting up with a lot of grass, especially in the Midwest, when the grass really grows in, it gets really frustrating dealing with getting caught up in grass. Texas rig is one of the best baits to get through that grass because of this hook right here. You can make the bait weedless with this right here. So it's a great versatile bait. You can throw a lot of different plastics on this bait right here. That's another reason why I love the Texas rig so much. You can throw so many different things on it, cover so many different basics with it. You can peg it, unpeg it. There's a lot of things you can do with the Texas rig. And on top of it, like I said, making it weedless is just a huge advantage to you guys. So now we're gonna go through my top plastics that I like to use for fishing on the Texas rig, and then we'll kind of cover how I fish it. So my first plastic here, I'm gonna pull the plastic out here, guys, and show you how to rig this one up as well. But my first plastic that I love using on a Texas rig, guys, is a Crawfish right here. The Rage Craw is absolutely crazy because these pinchers on here, guys, when this thing is dropping in the water column, are kicking and giving so much good action. My favorite place to throw this Crawfish is usually when I'm fishing cut banks that are like cut clay banks, because that's usually where those crawfish kind of live, is in those cut clay banks. Another thing is, crawfish are huge in a bass's diet, so they're used to seeing it. It's something that the fish are generally feeding on anyway, so it works really great. And those pinchers on here, guys, just give off a great action in the water, and they create a lot of really good vibration. So when I'm fishing cut banks, this is generally the bait I'm gonna use. How do we rig this up, guys, for a Texas rig? All we're gonna do, guys, is take the bait like so, and take your hook like so, and you're just going to go through the top of the hook right till where it bends. So right when it starts to bend there, then I go ahead and poke this through, and then I just bring it to the top, and then you twist your bait around, and then you can embed the hook into the bait, creating a weedless setup for yourself. So now you can see that the hook is not exposed at all. So the hook itself right here, guys, is in, just the tip of it is just barely into the bait here. So when you're bringing this through, that hook is not gonna get hung up on anything. So your complete setup is pretty simple, and this is exactly what it looks like right here. This is your Texas rig setup, guys, right there. It's perfect. Got that bullet weight on there, and then you've got this all weedless. So that's one of the reasons why I love the Texas rig so much, guys. And I'm not gonna rig up every single bait that I have on a Texas rig here, guys, but the next bait in line that I absolutely love fishing on a Texas rig, guys, is going to be a Gary Yamamoto Senko, guys. The Senko, I did a video talking about 5 different ways you can rig a Senko, guys. The Senko just plain and simple catches fish. At a lot of different rigs, guys, a Texas rig Senko is the way to go. This bait doesn't have a crazy amount of action, but it will catch you a number of fish, and it's just a tried and true method that catches fish. The next bait, guys, is one of my favorites for summertime bass fishing. When that water is super warm and those bass are just looking for a big and easy meal to eat, I will throw, and this bait right here won me a tournament last year, and that is a 10-inch Mondo worm right here. Green pumpkin, 10-inch Mondo worm. It has a little ribbon tail on here, but when it is super hot out, those bass are looking for an easy and big meal. And a 10-inch worm in the summertime, guys, is absolutely killer. So me personally, I really like this 10-inch Mondo worm. I love the ribbon tail on it. It's got a little groove on there that also creates some vibration. I think it just looks really cool in the water. So if you guys are looking for, especially summertime bass fishing, guys, you don't have any 10-inch worms, I would highly recommend trying out one of these Guggen Baits Mondo worms. It works just absolute killer. Won a tournament off of last year, caught ridiculous amount of fish that day off of the Mondo worm. It's just plain and simple. It just is a great all-around summertime lure. One of my absolute favorites that I got turned on to last year, guys, is Texas rigging a tube. Now, this tube right here is from Big Bites, guys. It's a green pumpkin tube with a little bit of like clear and purple on the tail here. But Texas rigging a tube can be absolutely killer, guys, especially for smallmouth. But I actually flipped quite a few docks with this on one of my favorite lakes to fish and caught quite a few largemouth off of there. But a tube is a great one, especially when the water's starting to get a little more pressured and you're kind of trying to bring that profile down a little bit. Or a tube is great in Texas rigged early season or kind of later in the season when they're kind of, the fish are a little more lethargic, looking for kind of a grub style bait. That's a great time to throw a tube. So I will always toss a tube around on a Texas rig. I just really prefer my stuff to be weedless, guys, so I will throw a tube on a Texas rig all day long. I actually caught my personal best smallmouth off of a Texas rig tube in Sister Bay, and it worked great. So I was just throwing around, I think the bass, it was like a 4.5 pound smallie, and I was just throwing around a green pumpkin tube on a 1/2 ounce Texas rigged EWG hook, and it worked great. Now lastly, this last plastic that I use for the Texas rig, guys, is a plastic that I will use when the water feels pressured. When there's a lot of pressure in the water system, there's a ton of fishermen out there just hammering away, I will switch it up to a creature bait. Now the creature bait is a great bait because not every creature bait is pretty much different for the most part. Not a lot of people are throwing them. A lot of people are throwing a Senko, a wacky rig, or a cross, something like that. So a creature bait is a great presentation that the fish generally haven't seen all year long, and you can get away with catching them. And like I said, most creature baits are all pretty much different for the most part, so the chances that you're throwing exactly what another guy's throwing, or they've seen it, those fish have seen it a lot, are pretty slim. So a creature bait is my favorite for using on super pressured water. Okay, so lastly, let's talk about how you're fishing this. So with the Texas rig, generally you're gonna throw the bait out there, cast it out, you're gonna let it sink to the bottom. And all you're gonna do is reel up, and you can either, you got kind of 2 options with this bait. So really you've got 2 options with this bait when you toss it out. You can either work the bait back by just picking up your rod tip and dragging the bottom, just kind of lifting your rod tip slowly and dragging the bottom, or you can pop it along the bottom. You can, when you cast it out there, you can just kind of pop it. Just give it a few pops as you're popping on off the bottom. That's personally the only 2 ways that I usually work a Texas rig back. For the most part, I will usually just toss it out there and I will just slowly drag the bottom with it, or I'll just kind of drag the bottom with it, hop it off the bottom, stuff like that. So those are pretty much my 2 ways of retrieving it. Now, when you feel the bite with this, guys, what's gonna happen is you're either gonna throw it out there and you're gonna see the line and feel it go thunk. If you feel and see your line jump 1 time, if you just feel it go thunk, or you see the line just jump, generally when you reel up slack and pick up on your rod tip, it's gonna feel heavy. That's when you know a fish definitely has it. Now if you throw it out there and you feel your rod tip, or you feel the line getting poked at, like something's nibbling at it or hitting it, they don't have it yet. A lot of times what that means is that the bait sank to the bottom, and that bass is like nosing the bait at the bottom. A lot of times if you just pick up on the rod tip and hop it once, that fish will just suck it right up. generally that's how you're gonna feel the bite. Sometimes you'll throw it out there and it'll be sitting on the bottom and a fish will come by and pick it up, and then next thing you know, you'll reel up your slack and pick up your line and you'll feel the fish on there, you'll feel it hard, like that weight, or you'll even see your line swimming in the water. So it takes a little getting used to feeling the bite, but for the most part, you're gonna notice that line jump once or feel it, or you're just gonna pick up and feel that there's a fish there. So Texas rig is a great option. That's pretty much the only ways I work it. It's not a super complicated technique to learn. It's pretty simple for the most part. So when you guys get out there, just start throwing it around and trying it out and see what your style is and how you like to work it. So there you guys have it. That is how to fish a Texas rig, my favorite plastics, things like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Let me know down in the comments below your favorite bait to use on a Texas rig. I'll also pin that comment, but let me know down in the comments. Maybe you got a plastic that I don't use that I can try out. So go ahead, post that down in the comments. Thank you guys for tuning in for this episode. Give it a big thumbs up if you liked it, and we will see you guys on the next one.